Hey guys, hey, welcome back to Sunday School. I know this has been a crazy and hard week, scary week this week with what's happened in our capital. But I want each of you to know that if any of you need someone to talk to, that Graham and Nancy and Morgan and I are all here if you need to talk to anybody. Most of all, we just want you to know that you are loved and that God is with us even when scary things happen sometimes. We've got a great lesson today for you. Moses Abraham is back for his final interview with the Magi, and it's a great one. We've got wonderful music by the Norman family singers and Paul and Mary Pritchard. Well, with that, let's head on in to the lighting of our candle.
May the Spirit of God guide us in the work of justice, compassion, and love.
More than 2,000 years ago, three strangers journeyed from distant lands in the east. These magi, or wise men, had journeyed for months, following a magnificent new star that had suddenly appeared in the sky. They had followed the star all the way to Jerusalem, where they sent a message to the powerful King Herod. "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We have seen his star, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed. "King of the Jews?" he said darkly. He wanted no rivals. "My lord," one of his attendants said nervously, "these strangers from the east, they say they are looking for a newborn child." "A child? Whose child?" Murderous jealousy was rising in the old king. A priest stepped forward. "There are prophecies in the scriptures, the promise of a child who will be born to save Israel." "Where will this Messiah be born?" demanded Herod. All the priests and scribes and experts were called together, and they told Herod that one day the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Herod called the wise men secretly and pretended to welcome them. "Search for the child in Bethlehem, and when you find him, tell me, so I can go and worship him too." So the wise men went on their way, and when they saw the star appearing over Bethlehem, they were overjoyed. They came to the house where Mary and Joseph were staying with Jesus. They offered their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and knelt to worship the little child who had been sent by God to save the world. Then they left secretly because they had been warned in a dream not to return to Herod. Soon, Herod sent soldiers to Bethlehem with orders to kill every boy child less than 2 years old. An angel appeared to Joseph in a dream and warned him, "Herod is searching for the child to kill him. You must escape at once." Mary and Joseph fled that night and went to live in Egypt until the old King Herod had died and there was no more danger. Then they returned at last to their home in Nazareth, where Jesus spent his childhood years. Well, hello everyone. It's me, Moses Abraham, once again. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and a happy New Year. Today, we're going to celebrate Epiphany. This recognizes the coming of the Magi. So we're excited to have our Magi sisters back with us. Let's dial them in using the Bible teleportation app. So here we go. Well, welcome back, Magi sisters. We're so glad you could join us to celebrate Epiphany. Are you up for sharing the second half of your story?
We are glad to be back and share the second half of our story. Sounds like all of you got your own Christmas star this Christmas, something that had not been seen in over 800 years.
It's great to be back. We are so sorry to hear that it was really cloudy and many of you could not see the Christmas star. There was many nights on our journey that we had to camp and wait for the skies to clear so we could follow the star.
Hey everyone! It's so nice to be back with all of you. We're excited to get to share the second half of our story.
So this week we are celebrating Epiphany. Can you tell us what Epiphany is about?
Epiphany celebrates our coming to visit Jesus and his mother. Often we are shown in the manger scene, but we did not arrive the night Jesus was born. We arrived sometime later when they were back in Bethlehem.
Epiphany is finally celebrated on January 6th of each year. It comes 12 days after Christmas.
Epiphany celebrates God appearing to tell us the good news of Jesus' birth. It honors our journey to go and worship the new baby. Epiphanies, appearances of God's love, are all around us. Sometimes we just have to open our eyes.
That's so true. There are epiphanies of God's love all around us every day. And sometimes our love and care for others can be those epiphanies too. So what happened when you finally arrived in Jerusalem?
After the long journey, we found ourselves outside the city of Jerusalem. We decided that the logical place to go first would be the palace of King Herod. We assumed that a newborn king would have been born in a palace, but no.
It had been a long journey. We were tired and yet we were excited to meet the newborn king. We went to King Herod's place but found no newborn king.
In fact, the news of the newborn king greatly worried Herod. Though he smiled, it was very clear that he was not happy to hear of this new king's birth.
I have always heard that King Herod was a pretty scary and angry guy, and not someone you wanted to cross. What did you learn about him, and what did you do?
But what we learned was that King Herod was not a true king. He had been backed by the Romans and seized power over the people. He was a puppet king.
King Herod loved his power, but he was terrified of anything or anyone that would threaten or take away his power.
Sometimes people come to power who should not be kings or leaders, as they think of only themselves and their own gain. King Herod was like that. He built all these fancy palaces and gathered more gold and wealth for himself, even as his people suffered.
That must have been a scary and challenging situation. What did you do?
Though Herod told us he wanted to worship the newborn king and asked us to come back to him to tell him who the king was, we sensed that he was afraid of anyone who might threaten his power.
We heard the whispers that King Herod wanted to kill this newborn king, and it was clear that he was no friend up to the king whose star we followed.
We knew we had to get out of there quickly and steer clear of King Herod. He may have smiled, but his eyes blazed of fear at the news we brought. Often those who seek power for only their own gain will stop at nothing to keep their power and their control. Often many suffer because of this.
That is both true and sad. What did you do once you escaped the palace? Where did your star lead you?
That star did not lead us to the throne room of a palace, but to a simple home of a carpenter and his wife, who were not in the big city of Jerusalem, but the little village of Bethlehem.
The star led us to a small, simple home in Bethlehem. Bethlehem was a small village just a few miles of Jerusalem. Bethlehem was where the servants, bakers, carpenters, and people who lived, who worked, and built things for the people of Jerusalem. It was where we found the true king.
Jesus and Mary were there at the house. Mary was just a teenage girl, and yet she had gentleness and wisdom well beyond her years. She welcomed us into their simple home, and we shared a meal and stories.
That must have been so powerful to finally arrive and worship the king you had traveled so far to see. Now, sometimes we find the holiest moments not in palaces of jewels and stone, but when we sit down together and share the journey, breaking bread together. I've always heard that you all brought gifts to Jesus and his family. What gifts did you bring?
I brought gold, and gold, as many would tell you, was a gift for the king, and this little baby was indeed the long-awaited king. But also I sensed that the road ahead for this family would be hard. Perhaps I am practical, but I wanted to ensure that this little baby and his family were provided for. And after seeing Herod in his palace, I sensed that this family was not going to be able to stay in Bethlehem for very long.
I brought frankincense. Frankincense was an incense that used in the temple as a sign of prayers being lifted up to God. In my heart, I sensed that this newborn's birth would be a prayer for peace, for justice, for compassion, for a better world, lifted up as an example to all of us.
I brought myrrh. Myrrh is an anointing oil often used to anoint a great leader, but myrrh is also used to anoint a body, as it is laid to rest in a tomb. My sisters thought it was strange that I brought myrrh, but what I know of life is that the path of those who strive to make the world better and work for justice, compassion, and peace, their path often demands sacrifice. In my heart, I believe that the path of this king, whom we had journeyed so far to see and whom we had worshipped that day, would demand sacrifice. Yet, the love he was bringing would defeat even death and change our world forever.
Very true. And you were right. They weren't able to stay there in Bethlehem. In fact, they had to flee to Egypt to escape the violence and suffering that Herod was about to inflict on the people there. We are told that Mary cherished the time she had with each of you and the gifts you brought. As we close this interview today, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
Life calls us to journey with hope. Sometimes the work of love asks us to stand up, to act, to dream, to follow a star. The work of love is hard. It is scary. But I want you to know that it is always worth it. It is what we have been created to do.
Dreams of hope are always worth chasing. God's love is always shining, even when all we can see is a cloudy night. Let your life be that frankincense of compassion and kindness, working with God to create the world as it can be, as it should be.
Take care of each other. We don't do this journey alone. We need each other. We need to provide for each other, support each other, listen to each other, and love each other. It is together, hand in hand with another and with our God, that we make this world better.
Well, thanks again to our Magi sisters today for their powerful interview, and to all those who have taken time to talk with us this Christmas season. It has been great to get to hang out with all of you. Remember, dare to hope, work for peace and justice, seek out and bring joy to the world around you, and dare to love with every fiber of your being. And remember, Jesus is with you always. Bye-bye.
Camel bell. Just a camel bell. Okay. Once upon a cold December, many long years ago, three important kings took time to travel a year or so. Over mountains, through deep valleys, traveling awfully slow. They took time to seek a Savior long years ago. With no heaters, Howard Johnson, nothing to ease the way. With no compass, Exxon maps, or help from the AAA. No galoshes, scarves, umbrellas for a rainy day. They took time and pains to find him the hardest way. What we learn from these three wise men is that we must take time. Time to find him, time to follow all the grit and grime. There are valleys we will enter, there are hills we'll climb. God will help us through it all if we just take time.
We gather for communion every week, and every week it's said just a little bit differently. If you listen to the worship service, you listen to how we do it in Sunday school, little tweaks, little differences, and that's the beauty of it, I think. And maybe that gets back to the fact that in the Bible, there are 4 different places where the words of institutions appear. They are in the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and in 1 Corinthians, attributed to the Apostle Paul. And they're all saying similar things. They've all got it just about right, but little differences, and that's what I like about it. Today, I'm going to read from Matthew 26, the way it appears there. While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to his disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins."
Well, friends, we just heard the story of the Magi who were following the star in the east and came upon the baby Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. What are we as people of faith seeking in this new year? Something to ponder this week and in the weeks ahead as we tell the stories of people of faith who have lived courageous lives in the centuries since Jesus was born. Take time to ponder this week, and we'll see you next Sunday.